Joe Khalil is the correct person to ask Senator Peters these questions. He's my colleague. He's our chief congressional correspondent for News Nation. I lean on him a lot of Sunday mornings because he's very, very good. Okay, if you knew that Crystal Falls in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan was actually in the Central Time Zone while the rest of the peninsula was in the Eastern Time Zone, you'd know him already. But if you don't, here he is, Senator Gary Peters.
All right. Hey, everybody. Good morning. How you doing? Senator Peters, thank you so much for joining us today on the Hill Nation Summit. For those that don't know, two Michigan boys,
That's
two
right.
proud Metro Detroiters up here. So
Right.
we'll just be chopping it up together here.
Absolutely.
So I do want to jump right in, and I want to start off with this Democratic primary to replace you, to replace your seat in the Senate. A lot of attention nationally has been on this race. You have a Democratic socialist-backed candidate in Abdel El-Sayed, and then you have a more establishment, moderate Haley Stevens. You did not have to endorse anyone. In fact, most people expected you not to do that. And just a couple days ago, you threw your support behind Haley Stevens. So why Haley Stevens, and why did you decide to jump into the race in that way?
Well, first off, Michigan's obviously an incredibly important state in terms of looking around the country and the Senate race. We really have an opportunity to take the majority in the U.S. Senate. If you would have asked me that a few months ago, I would have said I think that's highly unlikely. This is a guy who was the DSCC chair for 2 cycles, so I know the landscape. But it's changed. Clearly, we have that opportunity. But we don't have that opportunity if we lose Michigan. Michigan is absolutely ground zero, as you know, for the national race. I wanted to make sure we have what I consider an excellent candidate, a strong candidate that's on the ballot. That's Haley Stevens. I've known her for a lot of years. In fact, I first got to know her back in 2008 during the auto crisis and the Wall Street debacle of the Great Recession. I fought in my congressional district that I had Chrysler headquartered, and I fought aggressively to make sure Chrysler was part of the rescue plan, not just General Motors. Okay. Haley worked for President Obama. In that, we talked, worked together. She was a real fighter. So she's a fighter. She's a person who gets things done, which I think is important because you got to hit the ground running.
You started off by saying you need to win.
Right.
So I'm wondering, do you think somebody who is more of a progressive, and we've seen Democratic progressives win, DSA candidates win nationwide in certain districts, do you think a progressive is not capable of winning a very purple state like Michigan?
No, I think it's capable. If you look at where Michigan is, we're a purple state. We were talking about it off stage. Yeah. We know it's like the real purple state where you actually have independent voters as well. You've seen that in my elections where there have been big splits between folks voting for a Republican and voting for me. And so what I see from Michigan, people like practical, common sense folks who roll up their sleeves, get the job done, thinking about Michigan first, not about getting on national TV or being a celebrity. It's really about working. And so that's the kind of person that's traditionally won, a person like myself and others who have won. And I think that's the kind of makeup of, but doesn't mean the other ones can't win, but I think that's a safer bet.
There is something going on in the Democratic Party. And you had these Democratic Socialist-backed candidates winning in places like Colorado now, in New York, obviously. How do you view that? Why do you think these candidates are gaining traction and there is seemingly some energy behind that part of the party?
Well, and the places you mentioned are bluer than Michigan. Let's be very clear.
Yes.
You know, they're definitely bluer than Michigan, so it's going to be a different kind of test there. And it's not, to me, it's not surprising. If you go to red places, they tend to be more conservative and have moved more conservative over the years as well. So the same thing is happening in the Democratic Party.
So you don't think this is a movement it's just district by district?
Well, and it could be a broader movement too. But as to whether they're going to win I've always said, the most important election is not the primary, it's the general election. That's the true test of what exactly is happening, because ultimately, if you don't win, it really doesn't matter. And so that's what we'll have to see. That's why Michigan is front and center. A lot of people are looking at because it's going to be a true test in a true purple state.
Okay. All right, let's talk about you. So you have decided you're going to retire. I will not say your age, but I will say you are a young spring chicken relative to many others in the Senate. Why did you decide right now? Was there a moment when you thought, I've done my time in the Senate and I'm ready to hang it up?
No, actually, there wasn't one moment because I've been thinking about it for a long time. So when I got into Congress, I'm one of those folks who actually believe what our founders thought about Congress is that you go and you serve for a period of time, then you go back to your private life. You don't stay there for your life. And so when I was first elected to the Senate after 6 years in the House, I said, I'm going to run for re-election. After that, I don't know. And after re-election, I thought, no, it's time. Appreciate you saying how young I am, but I'm actually the age where most people in Michigan are fully retired at this age. So I was going to pass the torch. We have a good bench. Our candidates are great who are running for the Senate. It was time to pass it on to the next generation. I'm not going to retire, though. I'm going on to other things, but I won't be a senator. I'll do something else, but still be actively involved.
As we were talking about, you took over for Senator Carl Levin, who is a legend in the state of Michigan. The Senate is a much different place now than when you came in. I think you've built a career on being known for bipartisan work. You've co-authored a bunch of bills with Republicans, and chair of Homeland. But I wonder if you jumped into the Senate now, yourself from years ago, would you have been able to have that kind of career? It seems like it's a much more divided, much less bipartisan, less functional place, to be honest. What do you make of, how that's changed since you came in?
Unfortunately, it has changed. If you just look at the last 3 Congresses, I was the principal author of more bills signed into law than any U.S. senator. In fact, when Donald Trump, in that Congress, the second Congress, he signed more of my bills than he did any Republican bills. And it's because I always find Republican co-sponsors. We work together. We make that happen, which I think is the best legislation, where you bring people together so you have stability. But I will tell you, every year it gets a whole lot more difficult. Yeah. Every year it gets difficult. It gets more difficult when I go to the House to try to, because I can't just pass them in the Senate. They actually have to pass the House too, as all of us know. That place has become a lot more difficult. I can build relationships with Republican members there, and I go over there and spend time. But when you walk into an office, if it's somebody I don't know, there's more of a kind of hesitancy to try to, or kind of a wall that's put up. It takes longer to break that down. I've seen that change just in the years that I have, and that's a really, really sad thing.
So I want to talk about the losses, institutional knowledge of the Senate that is lost this year alone. You're retiring. You're going to have Senator Shaheen, Durbin, they're gone. On the Republican side, people like Cassidy, Tillis, we'll even throw Senator Graham, who we just lost, who did know how to work in a bipartisan way. Yeah. Are you worried that as you leave, and with a legacy of bipartisan work, the next Senate is just not going to have the players that legitimately know how to get things done?
I'm concerned, and what I see when folks that I've worked with, for example, in the past, who want to work in a bipartisan way, when they leave, they're usually replaced by someone who's much more partisan, and on both sides, not just ours, D's too. So, and I think, unfortunately, it reflects what's happening in our country. Our country is just becoming more partisan, more polarized. So Congress just reflects what's happening out in the economy, or out in the country rather, as well. And that's going to make it harder. And our republic does not function unless we find common ground. Finding common ground sometimes is not only is difficult, you actually get punished for it. Part of it's our media environment as well, that you don't get rewarded. If you're a common sense bipartisan senator, I don't get on the cable station.
If you get on News Nation, you will.
I get on News Nation.
This is our brand here.
But that's not what usually gets the attention, and our folks will call it, hey, Senator Peters just passed his bipartisan bill, love to talk about it. They're like, oh, okay, well, does he want to do news of the day and really go after so-and-so? Yeah. Then we can get him on the TV. So this is a negative feedback loop that's going to be very corrosive to our democracy.
Yeah, it's the latest tweet, right?
Right.
So what do we do about that? And I wonder if you feel like you will have a role in that in retirement. It is in many ways politically sort of the challenge of our time, is that everyone's in their corners. Social media, I think, makes that worse. What is to be done about this?
Well, I've got to do a lot, and I think we don't have the clear answers right now, which is part of what I want to do after I leave the Senate. You're absolutely right. I'm going to be working on policy issues related to how emerging technology is changing the landscape dramatically of politics, not only in this country, but around the world. What are the ramifications for that? How can we try to mitigate some of that? Yeah. These are not easy problems, but if we don't solve it, we're in trouble, and I think it's really the issue of our time that we have to solve.
Yeah. If you don't know, Senator Peters, the only senator who's actually in a for-real biker gang in Detroit. I'm just kidding. But you are a motorcycle enthusiast. So retirement, you said it's not actually retirement. You're going to keep working in a different capacity. Recreationally, what does that look like? Is that a lot of, you doing the motorcycle thing, or are you going to be as engaged, reading the news, keeping up with your colleagues, lobbying in some cases? What are you planning on doing?
Yeah, well, first of all, I got 3 grandbabies, so those are going to be a priority. Yeah. That's a real priority. Motorcycling will continue to do that. We'll do my big ride like I do every year all across Michigan with my gang of 30 or so of us. We'll do that. But I will probably work in academia, and I've been talking to some universities about policy centers, and what I'd want to do, though, is one that's focused on bringing people together, finding common ground. How do we do that? Okay. Kind of blend practical politics with academic research, try to find exactly what path we should take. Yeah.
So as a Metro Detroit guy, I can't let you off the stage without asking at least one auto industry question. And what I'm wondering is, as we look at electric vehicles development in China, they're trying to sort of corner the market now. What does the U.S. have to do, Congress, and really for Michigan itself to remain relevant and competitive in the auto industry? And how do you make sure China doesn't just undercut on cheaper vehicles?
Well, we got to make sure that they just can't dump Chinese vehicles into the United States. We saw that in Europe, what's happening, and these are heavily subsidized vehicles. These are not market competition here, so we can't allow that to be in the United States. But it's true, these vehicles are inexpensive. They're gaining traction in Mexico and Canada and places around the world. We have to step up. Our auto companies have to step up. The other area that I've been particularly involved in is autonomous vehicles, which is also the future. The Chinese are investing billions and billions of dollars into self-driving vehicles, which really represents the future of transportation. We have to make sure we're doing that here in the United States, and I've been working on legislation to put that regulatory framework in place to allow these vehicles to be developed here in the United States.
You think we're taking that as seriously in Congress as we should be?
No, we're not. So I'm trying to get a title of that in the Transportation Act going forward. We've got to have that framework. If the Chinese beat us in not only electric but in autonomous, it'll be really hard to catch up.
Okay. So we just got about a minute left. I want to leave everybody with a bit of a personal anecdote that I talked to Senator Peters about. A couple of months ago, I lost my dad, and he was my hero. So it was a tough loss. And he worked for the U.S. Army for 35 years as a mechanical engineer, civilian engineer. So we were going through his stuff, through his drawer, and I found in there something he kept, which meant he valued it. It was a letter from then House member Gary Peters, thanking my dad for giving you a tour of the Army facility in Michigan. And it meant a lot to me to read you thanking him, and it was a really personal note. And 2009, it was dated, which was your first year in Congress. Right. So to think back, I was a teenager at that time, but to think back, him giving you that tour, your first few months in, and for me to be on this stage sharing this with you in your last couple of months is just a really nice bookend. So thank you for taking the time to write that all those years ago. And I'm going to keep that forever. Appreciate you, Senator. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.